It's all about the vibes. 8:05 on a Thursday. Good morning. It's great to be here on KCMO. I'm noticing a theme. Like, I've been trying to figure out all week long what the themes are this week in Chicago at the DNC. And, we just talked to Mayor Lucas, mayor of Kansas City. He's there, tried to get the vibes and the feels from him. And it's still not clear to me what the actual policy positions are outside of Trump and some abortion sprinkled in here as well, and democracy and January 6th and the whole thing. I'm realizing a common theme they're pushing is freedom. And if there's any group that is gaslighting the bejesus out of the American people on the idea of freedom, it's this group. Tim Walz did it again last night.
But when we Democrats talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make a better life for yourself and the people that you love. Freedom to make your own health care decisions.
Okay, no one's going after gay marriage. Nobody's going after, even all the transgender stuff. Republicans just say, don't do it to kids. You do what you want when you're an adult, but sorry, we're not going to advocate for slicing up the body parts of children under the age of 18. That's sick. If that's freedom to you, then you need to be in a mental institution, okay? That's disgusting stuff. It's about children. I have not heard anybody mainstream say that an adult should not be allowed to change whatever they want to change. I may try to convince you otherwise if I'm a friend of yours, if I care about you, if I love you. But legally, the government, in that case, I don't think they've got a role in that. And there's not a Republican platform or policy position that suggests they want to prevent adults from doing what they want to do. So I don't know where they get away with this stuff of freedom, especially coming from the guy who, when he was governor during COVID of Minnesota, had a COVID hotline where you could rat out your neighbors who were breaking the rules. Like it was third grade all over again. You've got to be kidding me with this freedom stuff. It's like they want you to forget the last 3.5, 4 years when your grandma died alone in a hospital, when your husband was fired over not getting a shot that didn't prevent transmission anyway, when your teenage son got, potentially short-term or long-term health problems and heart problems, when you lost your business, when you weren't allowed to go to church, when your 2-year-old was forced to wear a mask. And you want to tell me about freedom? You want to preach about freedom when those are the policies you were pushing 3 short years ago? You got to be kidding me. You're the party of freedom. Why? How? Based on what? Because you want to be able to kill babies up until term? That's your definition of freedom? That's basically what Oprah said last night. Abortion's the American dream.
Now, over the last couple of nights, we have all seen brave people walk onto this stage and share their most private pain. Amanda and Josh, Caitlin, Hadley, they told us their stories of rape and incest and near-death experiences from having the state deny them the abortion that their doctor explained was medically necessary. And they've told us these things for one reason, and that is to keep what happened to them from happening to anybody else. Because if you do not have autonomy over this, if you cannot control when and how you choose to bring your children into this world and how they are raised and supported, there is no American dream.
There is no American dream, says Oprah, without abortion. That's the crux of what Oprah just said there. The American dream does not exist without unlimited, no guardrails around abortion. Okay. All right. But this is part of the theme of the week. Obama, same thing. Suddenly the party of freedom.
And we believe that freedom requires us to recognize that other people have the freedom to make choices that are different than ours. That's okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely okay. Barack Obama is right. But, of course, his interpretation of that is entirely wrong. His interpretation of that is entirely misguided. There's not a Republican platform and policy position around saying adults can't make decisions that are obviously in their best interests. When it comes to any LGBTQ issue, right? We say keep it away from children, allow people to be adults before they start doing some of these things, and that is far from unreasonable. The abortion thing, obviously, they'll see it as bodily autonomy. Many of us, half the country, sees it very differently, especially when you want to have no guardrails around it. You want to have no limits on it. You want to have it up until term. A lot of people would say, you know what, that's pretty radical stuff. That's pretty disturbing, especially when the science suggests now, and we full well know, that when you get to a certain point, boy, it's disgusting. It's disturbing. But now that is the group, that's the party that's trying to convince you they're all about freedoms. Really? Because for many of you and many of us who lived through 3-4 years ago, whether it's in blue cities, blue counties, blue states, it was a very different environment. And you dealt with an administration that's still in power today who wanted to create policy where they would require private sector companies, private companies to fire you if you did not do what they wanted you to do with the COVID-19 shot. Let's not forget that. The Biden administration tried to do that. Kamala Harris was the VP and is the VP when they tried to push that. Thankfully, it didn't work, but they wanted to do it. Go back to 2021. It wasn't all that long ago. I know we talk about that time like it was 30 years ago. It was 3 years ago. 3 years. Now, here's the good news. The good news is the betting markets are actually moving back in Donald Trump's favor. So the betting markets, which people watch very closely, and it's offshore, it's polymarket.com is where you can find all this. The betting markets had moved in Kamala Harris's favor by about 10 points over the last month. Trump was a heavy favorite. Kamala gets put in there, and the betting markets moved in Kamala Harris's favor to the point where she was the betting favorite as of last week. Well, last night, as the third night was dragging on to this DNC, Trump took a 7-point lead in the gambling markets, moving from -10 to +7 in just a few days. That's a 17% swing. Now, maybe the RFK Jr. thing is also playing a role in all this, but it's amazing that there's been a 17-point swing during a time when you've got a situation here where people are suddenly supposed to be liking what they're hearing from the DNC, and maybe they're realizing that there's a lot of hot air and not a lot of substance. 913-408-7957. Pete's in Olathe. What's up, Pete? You're on KCMO.
Hi, Pete. Enjoy the show. The DNC is throwing that word around a lot, but let's face it, adult freedom truly has an equal and corresponding responsibility. Otherwise, it's just a lofty idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, my man. Rob in Kansas City, you're next up. Hey, Rob, you're on KCMO. What's up, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, Pete? Big fan now.
Big fan now? Where were you? Where were you, Rob? I'm glad we turned you around, brother.
Yeah, well, I started listening about a month ago, and, it just became a fan. But I think the parties feel it, or their ideas are just lies, because everything that they're saying, either Trump was trying to do and was being blocked come hell or high water, or was reversed either in Congress or Senate. Like, they would block everything that they're essentially trying to say now. Or like the things that Kamala was saying last week, or Kamala, sorry.
Yeah, come on now.
Saying last week how she was doing all these things as VP that Trump did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember, my dad's a veteran. I remember going to the VA before Trump was in office. There was people in hallways. The places were nasty. I mean, it made your skin crawl going into a veterans hospital.
Yep.
Afterwards, People had rooms. The hospitals were clean. People had the things they needed to do their jobs as nurses and doctors that weren't old, nasty, or beat-up pieces of equipment. Now, afterwards, it's back to the same. Like, so...
Hey, but don't worry,
freedom?
Yeah. Well, Rob, and thank your father for the service. Appreciate that, man. I'm glad you found us on KCMO. But, there's only so much money to go around. The illegals have to be staying in 5-star hotels. We can't be taking care of the VA, Don't have time or money for that. 913-408-7957. We'll get to you as we roll through the morning, 8:15 on a Thursday. We're going to make it. We're going to make it. Okay, CMO 95.7 FM. As always, we're streaming at KCMOTalkRadio.com. The battle of preachy billionaires between, Oprah and so many of the others that we're hearing from. J.B. Pritzker this week, the governor of Illinois. It's been quite a scene. Quite a scene there at the DNC. Bill is in Blue Springs. What's up, Bill? You're on KCMO, my man.
Oh, thank you for taking this call. I'm amazed
Don't let me
at
down,
how
Bill.
they
Don't let me
accuse
down.
Trump of being a dictator and never leaving, and all you see is Pelosi's, Obama's, and Clinton's looking for power again. They just can't get away from the power scene.
Yeah, they love the power. You just got to follow Nancy Pelosi's stock picks. That's an important thing to do. There are accounts on social media where you can follow Nancy Pelosi's trades that she makes or her husband makes in the markets. And listen, man, she crushes the markets. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So they love the power. She was speaking last night, too. Kind of looked like a plastic figurine last night. It was strange as I was watching Nancy Pelosi. But, she was up there. And, yeah, I mean, it's the same old folks, the same people who have been in charge. They've had the White House for 12 of the last 16 years. But trust me, this time, the next 4, they're going to get it right.
She's the only human I've seen that moves like a marionette. That hand gets like swirling around out there, and it's like, it looks like a puppet's trying to operate that hand.
Overland Park, Jeff, what's happening, my man?
Hey, morning, Pete. So, you're talking about this quote-unquote weird term that the left keeps using. I genuinely believe that that's part of the socialist Marxist agenda here. And the reason I say that is, if you look at youth of America today, clearly there's social engineering going on. And they have to rely on this innocuous language. So they use terms like weirdo instead of something more serrated and derogatory. And I think what's happening here is the politicians on the left know this, and they're using terminology like weird to try and pull in the youth, get their attention, get them to lean left. If you think about how to take over a nation without boots on the ground or war, you do it through the youth. You indoctrinate the youth, and you allow the older generations to just phase out over time. And I think this is a piece of that agenda. Otherwise, us on the right, we look at the word weird and we're like, what the hell are they talking about? Weird. It means something different to us.
Here's what I would say, Jeff, and thank you, man. I disagree because I think at this point they're just throwing stuff against the wall. What you see right now, and this has been studied, it's been pulled out, younger men, Gen Z men, are leaning right more than they have at any point in the last 30-plus years. Now, young women are leaning very far left. But the gender gap politically is largest amongst the youth. So they're not connecting with young men. They're not. And yes, they've got young women. They've got them all locked in. There's no doubt about it. The gender gap, though, amongst young people is tremendous. If I was trying to reach out to young men and trying to get them back into my camp, I'm not sure I'd be using the term weird. I just think that they've kind of given up on young men and trying to get them into their camp, and they're just doubling down on what works. And I think here's where I think the weird thing came from with Tim Walz, and that's kind of been the big attack against Republicans. They're all weird, says the party of 9 different pronouns. But where I think it came from is in the wake of Donald Trump nearly being assassinated, everyone was like, turn down the temperature, right? As Michelle Obama calls him a racist this week. But turn down the temperature. So how do you turn down the temperature if you're the Democrats when you've talked about this guy like he's Hitler for 8 years? What do you do? What do you say? Well, weird. I mean, they're like it's like a nice way to insult somebody. And that's where I think it came from. I think it came post-assassination attempt. They wanted to pretend like they were turning the temperature down. So what do you do? What do you call somebody if you're trying to insult them, but you want to act like you're not insulting them too bad? Well, weird.
You can think of it like Buffalo Wild Wings hot wings chart there.
Yeah.
You can get the ghost peppers, or you can get jalapeno, or you can just get the mild black pepper. We're just turning it down in verbiage, but
yes.
not the attack plan.
I really don't, and I respect the thought, Jeff, but I don't think this is anything more than that. I don't think this has been flushed out, or I don't think this is kind of some deep-seated thought process where weird is supposed to connect with the young voter. I just think it was a way to insult Donald Trump and insult Republicans at a time when they thought they had to use kid gloves in the wake of an assassination attempt. And now it's like kind of sticking, so they're going to go with it because, frankly, it's all they got. And they have to act like they haven't been the people in power, especially in the White House, for 12 of the last 16 years. So when all you've got is kind of saying to people, hey, my opponent is weird, and if you vote for him or you vote for them, you're a really bad person, and by the way, we love abortion, when that's kind of your whole premise and your whole point, I think it's more about that. It's just grasping at straws for some kind of an insult. Paul's in Kansas City. He's on KCMO. What's up, Paul?
Hey, Pete. Yeah, I watched the contrast yesterday between Waltz and that magnificent speech on foreign policy that President Trump gave at Asheville, North Carolina. You talk about a contrast in policy and gravitas on foreign policy, what he said yesterday. And the point I was telling John was he talks about Obama, and I'm thinking, oh, man. He goes, Obama said some bad things about me. I'm like, here we go. And he stopped. He said, my advisor said don't do it. And he went right back to contrast foreign policy and what a threat Comrade Harris would be to our national security. She has no foreign policy gravitas whatsoever. Great speech yesterday. I mean, I watched the entire thing, and he's just nailing it point by point on what she did and what her administration did and what they went to. And then that deployment dodger gets up there last night. I don't know where this guy's from. My gosh. you contrast those two people
Minnesota
side by side.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. You know Trump gave a good speech when no one's talking about it, right? Trump's killing it on the speeches when the media doesn't cover them. That's when you know he's kicking butt. 913-408-7957. Pete Mundo on KCMO.